Hi, pretty girl. My pretty girl. Is it Brenda? She a pretty Brenda. Are you a pretty girl? Say hi to the internet people. Hi, internet people. Mama got to record now. No. She's like, no, stay. Keep petting me. Well, I can pet you for a little while I talk. So, kind of mentioned this in the chapter video last week, but today's video is going to be about Emporio Ivankov, who is the Okama King, Miracle Man, Queen of the Kamabaka Queendom or Kingdom, depending on whichever translation you want to go with. I prefer the Kamabaka Queendom setup that they have, since it is kind of an island of, drag queens and Okama and everything like that. So my first introduction to Ivankov was through the anime when I was getting at some point in time caught up when it popped up on TV again, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. I don't remember if I, because I saw I have a weird history when it comes to the different bits of One Piece, and I'm like, well, I've read that, and I've seen that, and I've seen this part, and I've read that part, and it's like, okay, which part did I see first, and which part did I read first? I don't remember. But Ivankov is very memorable. Ivankov is a very interesting character to get introduced to. Part of the one of the founding members of the Revolutionary Army, a commander within the Revolutionary Army. A friend of dragons, friend of Bartholomew Kuma, former slave, as we just found out this past week with the newest chapter. Whole bunch of stuff. Okay. Helped kind of set up the Okama Paradise of level 5.5 and everything within Impel Down for all of that. So, fun with that. So today, for the Royals and Rulers series, I will be talking about Emporio Ivankov. For side note, in the anime, and some of the filler that they did where they were showing what was going on with the other Straw Hats while Luffy was on his way to Marineford and everything. On his way to Impel Down and then on his way to Marineford and everything, when we were getting the catch-ups with the other Straw Hats, and Sanji's on Kamabaka Island, or whatever the heck the name of the island is, where he's there and he ends up dealing with the temporary queen. I believe Charlotte is her name, if I remember correctly. I probably don't have that correct, but she's not quite a canon character and there's not a lot of information on her, so I'm not really going to worry about her at this point in time. But I will be talking about Ivankov, because we know a fair bit about Ivankov, and we learned more. So, for basic information, Ivankov is 53 years old, and they have the Horu no Mi, or the Horm fruit, or the Hormone fruit, depending on how you want to pronounce it based on the translation. The dog is laying in the hallway. And that means that Ivankov, as has been demonstrated multiple times since we have met Ivankov, has the ability to alter the hormones, not just within themselves, but within other people as well. As in, they can set, Ivankov can, alternate their own gender, they can alternate other people's gender, they can also alternate, helping someone heal from poison, probably could make someone, be affected by a poison more, depending on certain hormones that they mess with. Has adrenaline hormones, has a whole bunch of other types of hormones that they're able to, mess with and everything like that. So we get to see a lot of that throughout the course of, Impel Down arc, and not necessarily a lot of it at Marineford, but a little bit at Marineford. Ivankov will also adjust the size of their own head to make it bigger, or back to somewhat normal size for Ivankov, whatever normal size for Ivankov is, based on whatever they feel like that at that point in time. So we have that. In regards to Ivankov's history, which we actually just found out something new about, as I said in the last chapter, and so we're on break this week, so there's not going to be new information, hopefully not quite yet. So we found out in the last chapter that Ivankov is actually a former celestial dragon slave, just like Koala, just like Kuma, just like Fisher Tiger, just like probably other members of the Revolutionary Army. That just hasn't been explained yet, and that Ivankov at some point in time, Ivankov was born, and then at some point in time they were taken by the celestial dragons and sold as a slave or bought as a slave or whatever, forced into slavery. Just like what we saw happen with Kuma. We don't know what age Ivankov was made a slave. Could have been when he was still a little child. Could have been only a few years ago. We don't know, because the current flashback that we are getting is Ivankov, let's see, he's 53 years old, and the flashback is taking place 38 years ago, so I think that would make him 14, 15 range, give or take. So, a teenager. And Ivankov seems to have this other slave with him whose name is Ginny, who we don't know anything else about. She's Luffy's mom theory, she's Bonnie's mom theory, she's the person Bonnie is cloned from, she's someone else that we don't know about yet, she's some combination of all of these. And we don't know that yet, we don't know anything about that, we just know that they have a brother-sister bond, whether that means they are actual biological brother and sister, or, which, if true, is, I guess, interesting, particularly if there is a relation to Bonnie or Luffy in that regard. But, stuff like that. And Ivankov seems to have been a very problematic slave, from the fact that we are seeing in the chapter that they are setting up to do their version of the most dangerous game, where they are going to just release the slaves all over the island and then allow the celestial dragons to go and hunt them, which is just horrible. And I don't know exactly how much of a thing that's actually been done in history, but I'm sure there have been some very sick individuals who have set up very similar things. Very similar types of tournaments. I mean, very similar things happen in the Hunger Games and stuff like that. But Ivankov, from what we can determine, probably was just this very problematic, rebellious slave that refused to be broken, and now is interacting with Kuma for the first time. And my thought is pretty much just through whatever point and stuff happens during this flashback, we will see somehow that Kuma and Ivankov escape, possibly Jenny as well. We'll see how that goes, that they escape, and they then later on end up meeting Dragon and helping found the Revolutionary Army. We also know at some point in time, Ivankov eats the hormone fruit and gains that ability, and then is able to use that and kind of becomes this person that can do miracles. Whatever you want to do, say, for miracles, doing the gender swapping, helping with healing, different things like that. Can probably even, well, I was gonna say maybe could actually full up change someone's appearance beyond just gender swapping, but I don't know if that would be something that the hormone devil fruit would be able to manipulate enough. But, so we learn about that and everything, and it's, some point in time, at some point in time, Ivankov has encountered Crocodile in the past. We don't know exactly when that was, but encountered Crocodile and did something for Crocodile that the Crocodile does not want other people to know about, or has a weakness, which so many people are like, oh, it's the extra weakness to water, or, oh, they changed Crocodile's gender, or blah, 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 this, or blah, 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 that. Insert Crocomom theory, which I don't buy. Crocodile is Ginny. That's why they changed their name. No. Had a horrible falling out with Ivankov. No. That's going to be a theory somewhere. I can bet you that much. By someone. But interacted with Crocodile at some point in time. And then, of course, 22 years before the start of the actual storyline, Dragon, Ivankov, and Kuma founded the Revolutionary Army, which seemed to start off as some form of like the freedom fighters or whatever. And Ivankov was one of the commanders, and I believe ended up becoming the commander in the Paradise side of the Grand Line. Or ended up having that title later on. Also, at some point in time, Ivankov ended up, being on Kamabaka Island and helping set up that, or setting up the Kamabaka Kingdom, or it may have already been there for all we know, and then ended up being made queen of the Kamabaka Queendom by proving themselves the strongest or whatever, similar to what happens on Amazon Lily with, the Kuja. Although I have no idea if this would ever happen in the series, because I don't know if we know the exact location of the Kamabaka Queendom in relative to Amazon Lily, but having those two islands interact would be very interesting. I mean, Kuma and Hancock have interacted, if I remember correctly, which I'll go over, but like seeing those two islands interact with each other would be very, very interesting. Would be a very interesting thing to do, or seeing those two fighting forces fighting alongside each other would also be a very interesting way of doing it. That could happen. We'll see. But at some point in time, Ivankov becomes the leader, the queen, the king, queen, whatever, the ruler, the monarch of the Kamabaka Queendom. And eventually what ends up happening is, of course, what is it, like 12 years ago or whatever, when the flashback happens where everything happens on Dawn Island with the Gray Terminal and it burning and everything like that, where Dragon and Ivankov and Kuma are there. And they are, seeing everything that's happening with, the burning of the Gray Terminal and all of the horrible things that, the Goa Kingdom is doing. And they end up, saving a bunch of the people, that were in the Gray Terminal. They save a bunch of them, and eventually, I'm assuming they join the Revolutionary Army. And, Ivankov has their hell wink that they do where they just blow stuff away. And they're able to do that. And then that's also when they end up encountering Sabo, because, of course, everything happens with Sabo and Jalmak, and Sabo's ship gets shot and blown up, and Sabo ends up surviving but has amnesia and is found by Dragon and then brought to the Revolutionary Army. And then Sabo ends up, staying there. Also, during this flashback, we get more hints of, just how overly dramatic Ivankov can be, which is just the way Ivankov works. And at some point in time, Ivankov would have met their number 2, or their lieutenant, Inazuma, who I love Inazuma. They're great. Don't really have a place to talk about him thus far throughout this series, because he's not really a royal or a ruler. At some point in time, I might do something where I talk about the Revolutionary Army, but we'll see. But, Inazuma's awesome and has the snip fruit and everything that I love. Inazuma's great. And at some point in time, both Inazuma and, both Ivankov and Inazuma end up getting captured by the world government, by the Marines. Now, depending on what happened, it's either Kuma or Ivankov just allowed themselves to be captured, kind of the way Roger did, and they just locked him up along with Inazuma inside of level 5 and Impel Down. And at some point, he was demoned away, meaning they escaped, and then they found their way into level 5.5 and started setting up level 5.5, which, unbeknownst to Ivankov at the time, had actually been set up by Morley, who was the giant with the push fruit, who later on is one of the other commanders within the Revolutionary Army and is one of, Ivankov's friends. And that may have been something where, like, later on when Ivankov has been reunited with the other commanders and they're all actually, like, talking, and, like, Ivankov, like, telling them what happened in, within level 5.5 with being an impel down and everything like that. It's like, yeah, I found this area inside of Impel Down that was like this area that had been messed with between between levels 5 and level 6, and all these different rooms had been created and everything like that, and had different tunnels and routes to all different places within the castle or within Impel Down in the prison. And I ended up setting up, or there's this kind of setup was already there. He may have changed it into the new Kamaland setup, but it may have already been an area where, like, other prisoners had managed to escape to and had been demoned away. And then Marley's like, oh yeah, I set that up. That was a fun thing to do. I had so much fun doing that. And then I just eventually escaped. It's like, that could have been the conversation, in all honesty. But Ivankov ends up in Impel Down, and then during the Impel Down arc, when Luffy has been poisoned by Magellan, Mr. 2, Bon Clay, is working his way through to try to find Ivankov, because if anyone can help Luffy, it's Ivankov. It's the Miracle Man. And, through his disguise and everything, they get into level 5, and then they end up making their way through level 5, where they are eventually found by Inazuma, and then brought down to level 5.5, where Luffy is given treatment by Ivankov, and where Bon Clay is then eventually introduced to Ivankov, and Ivankov is introduced to us as the audience through this stage production performance type thing with backup dancers and lights and looking like they're in like an underground club, which they are in an underground club, so that's very applicable there. And of course the references to, of course, Ivankov being based off of Dr. Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show are very not lost on me. I mean, my mom's name is Janet. Damn it, Janet. That's not lost on me in the slightest, although that would have been funny at some point in time. I know Frankenfurter is not the character in the show that says it, but it would have been funny if that was thrown in at some point in time. Just Ivankov to some random other Okama. Damn it, Janet, go away. That would have been funny. So there's that, and of course Ivankov does the performance where he's introduced, and we're like, okay, who the heck is this person? And then Ivankov ends up interacting with, Bon Clay, and ends up explaining, that Luffy is currently being treated, and he's, he begged him to, that Luffy begged Ivankov to save Bon Clay first, and then that, allowed Ivankov to then be like, okay, yeah, I'll save you too. And then during this time frame is when Bellet, who is just this other prisoner within the prison, whose father had been a king, who ended up on Kamabaka Island at some point in time and ended up getting changed into a woman by Ivankov, and that just destroyed their family, tries to attack Ivankov. Ivankov then, this is where we get the introduction to their powers, grows their nails, stabs Bellet, and then turns Bellet into a female. And yeah. And that's where we get the introduction to what Ivankov's powers are, or at least what the basis of the power is. And of course, because of Ivankov having this power, that has resulted in lots of different theories, the Croco Mom being the most famous. Once Ivankov interacts with Crocodile, that becomes like the most famous one. But Ivankov, then uses their hormone powers to help Luffy be able to start healing from the poison. It'll take 10 years off of Luffy's lifespan and everything in order to do it, but Luffy is willing to make that deal, and Ivankov uses the healing hormones on Luffy, and throughout that night, Ivankov watches as, Luffy is fighting against the poison and fighting for his own life against the poison, and Ivankov and the rest of the Okama, Bon Clay, ends up getting the rest of the Okama to then cheer for Luffy as he heals. And, and that just like Ivankov is very amazed by this. I still want Bon Clay to come back and be a straw hat. I love Bon Clay. He's great. Bon Clay is awesome. But eventually after that night, when Luffy wakes up the next morning and starts just like guzzling down food to regain his energy so he's able to go and try to help save Ace. After that results in when Luffy ends up going to Luffy and Ivankov and Bon Clay and a bunch of the other Okama end up making their way down to level 6 where Ace is supposed to be being held. And they end up, I don't know if this was something they just added in the anime or if this was something that was like in the manga anyway. There's like a guard there that won't let them through. And then Ivankov like stabs them and changes them into a woman. And then the guard is then like on their side. And I'm like, how did that work? How did that work? I don't care, but it worked. I don't think we ever see that guard again, if I remember correctly. That guard probably got fired or escaped with them and is now hiding within the Okamas somewhere, which would be interesting to see, I guess. But they get to level 5 or level 6 and they deal with that, and this is where we have the interaction between Ivankov and Crocodile that has resulted in the Crocomom theory because reasons and people and logic gets thrown out the window at times. I don't buy that theory. I think it's just something else happened and it may never be explained, or it may end up getting explained at some point in time and we just will not know until it happens. Or it doesn't happen, and then Oda just explains it in a side thing or whatever, in an SBS at some point in time when it's, he's like, I'm not going to reveal this in the story, I'll just say what it was. Crocodile wanted facial surgery, and Ivankov did that. I don't know. Whatever that's going to be. But they then, of course, end up, Ivankov and Luffy and the others end up fighting their way through Impel Down, back up, along with Jinbei is there as well, along with Crocodile and Mr. 2 that they pick up along the way, and Bon Clay, and it's all of them fighting the way up through Impel Down, and this coincides with when Buggy and Mr. 3 are releasing all the other prisoners and all of that, and they end up fighting all the way up through and through, all the way through, and getting their way out of Impel Down. And during this fight is, of course, when at one point in time they end up having to deal with Sadie and the Impel Down beasts. And this is where we have it that Ivankov reveals that they can also change their own gender, which is something that would generally be thought of anyway. If they can manipulate other people's genders, they should be able to manipulate their own. And Ivankov, uses the power on themselves and shifts into their female form. And then ends up having a fight with Sadie to kind of demonstrate how strong Ivankov is, which is a very, I really like the fight. It's a fun way of doing a fight and everything like that. And, so Ivankov does all of that type of the fight against Sadie and helping, work their way through and stays in the female form for a little while. And then eventually changes back when, Ivankov has to deal with Magellan and has to end up fighting against Magellan during that time frame. And eventually this ends up, there's the fun fight there and everything. And eventually they end up, managing to escape. And they make their way out of, get out of Impel Down, get onto one of the ships, and they manage to escape. During this time frame, at some point, Inazuma ended up being hurt. And then because Inazuma was hurt, they then ended up putting like Inazuma into like Ivankov's hair is I think where they hid Inazuma, if I remember correctly, because he would be safe there, I guess was their logic. And And, so we have, that shows how much Ivankov cares about Inazuma. We also see how much Ivankov cares about the other Okama that are like under Ivankov's protection and everything like that from level 5.5. And they end up going with Ivankov and everything like that onto the ship, and being alongside Luffy in that regard. And we see Ivankov being concerned about Inazuma during the trip on their way to Marineford. And then, of course, when they do get to Marineford, when they, fly up over the ice and then end up the ship ends up tipping and dropping them along, dropping them all onto Marineford, which is just funny. And dropping them right into the battle and everything like that. And Luffy, and then of course Ivankov is there and working on trying to, help Luffy get to Ace, and sees Luffy interact with Whitebeard, interacting with Whitebeard, and it's just blown away by the fact that Luffy is just blatantly talking with Whitebeard. It's like, oh my god, Buggy's there too. Oh my god, and that was just funny. Just blown away by that conversation that's happening there. Throughout the fight in Marineford, Ivankov deals with various, vice admirals and other things like that to kind of demonstrate Ivankov's strength, and is helping Luffy fight his way up to where Ace is. And during the time, I don't remember, backtracking a little bit, I don't remember if it was, I think it was during the time frame when they were in Impel Down before they started the escape, because Luffy ends up telling Ivankov that, oh, well, yeah, I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and somehow the subject of dragon comes up. And that's when Ivankov finds out that Luffy is Dragon's son, because, at Water 7 is when Luffy found out who his father was from Garp, and all of that. And this is where we're finding out about that connection or whatever. And I don't remember the exact impetus for the conversation where it's brought up, but Ivankov mentions that Ivankov did not even know that Dragon had a child, let alone that Dragon had a son, and that son was, Luffy's age, was 17 years old at that point in time. I mean, Ivankov kind of figured Dragon had family, but didn't really know, I guess, what the family was. Ivankov may not even have known that Garp was Dragon's father, but I think they would have at least known that. I think Ivankov at least knew that. But so we have that interaction where he finds out about that, and then they have the other interaction where he's just like, oh, well, if you're Dragon's son, then that means that Ace must be Dragon's son too. And Luffy's like, no, Ace isn't Dragon's son. Ace is Goldie Roger's son. Is Gold Roger's son. What? Where that revelation happens, where we get that revelation. Ivankov is present for that, and I think the fact that Luffy is Dragon's son is what helps prompt Ivankov to start, to actually help Luffy try to escape Impel Down, and kind of start setting that up there. But eventually it ends up, during the back to Marineford, during the Battle of Marineford, Ivankov ends up interacting with Kuma, that has been turned into the pacifista at that point in time. And Ivankov was just like, Kuma, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you fighting alongside the world government? And this implies that, because we don't ever get the exact time frame that Ivankov was sent to Impel Down, was captured and taken to Impel Down. I looked, I could not find where it stated how long Ivankov had been there. It was just, they were brought there at one point in time within the last, well, I mean, at the time frame, it would have been within the last, I would say, 8 to 9 years. Because it would have happened after everything happened with the Goa Kingdom and the flashback that we get in the post-war arc, and then a little bit after that, because Ivankov, has a good relationship with Sabo and everything. And then at some point in time, it's hinted that Ivankov, as I said, it's hinted that Ivankov allowed themselves to be captured and taken to Impel Down and then imprisoned, and then, escaped and was hiding within the prison, in 5.5, probably to like build up allies within the prison, within the prisoners, to build up those allies, so that way at some point in time, when given the signal by Dragon, would be able to escape. That is the thought process that I think most people have. And that means that during the time frame that Ivankov would have been in the prison, while they would still get updates from the newspapers and everything like that, that's only from certain perspectives. They weren't really able to get communication directly from Dragon or from Kuma or from any of the other members of the Revolutionary Army unless they were captured and brought in as well. And what ends up happening is during that time frame is when Kuma, probably volunteered to go and become, a test subject for Vegapunk, and when everything happens there, and where we're touching on right now with, stuff on Egghead Island and stuff like that, where we're learning about what happened there, because when Ivankov interacts with Kuma, Ivankov is very much like, why are you doing this? Why are you working with the world government? Why are you fighting alongside the Marines? What happened to you? Why did you allow yourself to be experimented on and everything? And Kuma is, at that point in time, has supposedly been just, no longer has his, memories and everything like that. And I believe it's Doflamingo that explains to Ivankov that, Kuma's been turned into a pacifista. He's nothing more than a robot at this point in time, designed, programmed to follow the orders of the world government and the Marines and those that they have dubbed as, part of the authority for it. And that just makes Ivankov very, very angry, which is understandable. And it also adds the other layer to the fact that, from what we've seen in the most recent flashback in the chapter, that Kuma and, Ivankov managed to escape being slaves while working together. That Ivankov helped Kuma want to keep living and helped them get to the point where they could keep going and keep fighting and find their way to freedom and eventually, form the Revolutionary Army. And whether or not Kuma would have told Ivankov and Dragon about Nika, which if he did, then that means that they may have a rough idea. They may not know that Luffy has the Gamu Gamu no Mi, because that doesn't mean that, Kuma knew that or anything, but it means that maybe they know about Nika. And they know about, Nika, the sun god, and everything like that, and the drums of liberation and everything like that, because Kuma may have told them, which would be a very interesting concept to find out about. But, Kuma, the pacifista version of Kuma does end up attacking Ivankov, which is, where a lot of this, interaction ends up, happening. And Kuma doesn't have any memories at this point in time of Ivankov, which, again, is just, makes Ivankov very sad and everything, but eventually ends up, Ivankov ends up kind of not getting over it, but it was like, okay, I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to move on and go start fighting someone else. Watches as Whitebeard gets stabbed, watches, is like very happy when Luffy manages to get Ace, and then just like watches in horror as Akainu, magma fists Ace and does all of that. And, Ivankov just is in horror as he watches all of that happen, and, fights alongside the Whitebeard pirates in order to try to, help get to Luffy and help get Luffy safe and everything like that, and helps, Luffy and Jinbei and Buggy and everything, helps with like that whole escape that happens. And like, Ivankov watches as like Luffy just breaks during that moment, during the moment with Ace where he dies. He just watches as Luffy breaks. And it's like, Ivankov's known Luffy for what, less than 2 days at this point in time. And while Ivankov may have been somewhat familiar with Luffy because of the newspapers, that doesn't mean, that means that Ivankov was like, oh, well, this is an interesting kid. And then finds out that, oh, Luffy is dragon's son is like the son of one of my best friends. Dude didn't ever tell me he had a son, but okay. And then like all of that, and then has watched Luffy do nothing but try to, he put Bon Clay's, he put, Mr. Two's, health and protection above his own in that regard, the same way that he did with Nami and Sanji on Drum Island when he climbed the Drum Rockies to get to the castle and everything, when they interacted with Kureha and Chopper. So there's that, and watches as Luffy fights his way through to get to, level 6 to try to save Ace, and then as he does everything he can to fight his way up through, Impel Down in order to escape, to try to catch up to where Ace is, and then all the way to Marineford and everything, and just all of that. And Ivankov just like watches all of this and is already just kind of like enamored with Luffy. And Ivankov helps with getting Luffy and getting, him, out of there, like Hell winks to Kainu, which is funny. And helps with all of that with Luffy's escape and with, Jinbei and Buggy being able to help Luffy escape and everything like that. And Ivankov and the others and a bunch of the Okama are able to escape as well. And I don't think they're not on Law's submarine. They end up on another ship or something that they like commandeer out of the Navy and everything, after Shanks shows up and makes the war stop and, everybody's able to leave and everything. And Ivankov, I do believe, does interact with Hancock. So two very interesting queens of very different islands interacting with each other, interacts with Hancock. And then after Ivankov knows that Luffy is in safe hands between Hancock and Jinbei and Law. Law's a little iffy, but, Law's a little iffy. So it's like, I don't know you. Who are you? Luffy's in good hands with them and everything like that. So we see that, and then that's when Ivankov and the Okama then end up making their way back to the Kamabaka Kingdom. Which, again, I do believe it is in the new... It's in the Paradise Site of the Grand Line, but I don't remember if it is within one of the calm belts or where it is in location, but it's like within that area of like the area near the first half of the Grand Line. And Ivankov makes his way back to his way back to the island, where he ends up interacting with Sanji. And because he needs proof that Sanji is part of Luffy's crew, he ends up keep testing Sanji with like the posters and like trying to get Sanji to admit that like the Sanji poster is him. But Sanji's like, well, it is my bounty poster, but that's not me, and just like all of that, and like them just arguing with each other. And the anime, again, they did some additional stuff in the anime that was a very fun way of doing it in the anime, where they have it that, when Sanji ends up seeing Ivankov for the first time, Ivankov is in the female form, and Sanji is just, love struck. And then refuses to fight Ivankov, and then Ivankov changes back into the male form, and then Sanji's like, and then has to go through everything there and dealing with, trying to fight Ivankov, and eventually it's Ivankov is like, okay, because at some point in time Ivankov's like, okay, fine, you are from Luffy's crew, I'll give you that much. What do you want me to do about it? And Sanji is just like, well, I need to train. And then he finds out about, the 3D2Y happens and everything. And Sanji's like, okay, well, I need to train and get stronger so I can help my captain and help my crew. And Ivankov's like, okay, what's your plan from there? And Sanji then ends up eating some of the Newcama food and everything like that, and is just very much impressed with it. And again, this is something that I think is a little more added in the anime than it is in the manga, but Sanji ends up actually training by running around the island and trying to find all the different chefs and that know how to make all the different different types of food and everything like that, while also being chased around by the other Okama that are on the island, along with Ivankov, and learning about the cooking, but also the fighting and everything like that. That's where Sanji ends up being for the next, 2 years during all of that time frame. So we have all of that. And so Sanji is off doing that, and then Ivankov is like overseeing Sanji's training and everything. And at some point, this Ivankov ends up contacting Dragon, and they end up talking about Luffy, and Dragon confirms that yes, Luffy is my son, even though we've never actually met. You know, because it's also confirmed by Garp that A, Dragon is his son, B, Luffy is Dragon's, son, so Luffy is Garp's grandson, so that gets like proclaimed to the whole world, and Monkey D. Dragon's full name is revealed to the world at that point in time when everything was happening at Marineford, if I remember correctly. And everything by like Sengoku, I think is the one that makes that announcement. But, Ivankov communicates with Ivankov is communicating with Dragon and getting kind of updates and everything like that. So stuff happens there, and of course Sanji, has to work his way around, defeating the 99 masters of the new Kama Kempo while evading the island's inhabitants and everything like that. And, if Sanji completed these tasks, that Ivankov would grant his wish of, helping him get back to, helping him get back to, Sabaody after 2 years. I think it's also, I don't remember if this is something that they just throw in the anime or if it was something that was in the manga anyway, but it's just like, and you have to be able to, keep your manhood while you're, running, no guarantee that you'll be able to keep your manhood while you're at it. Then of course Sanji is just like, oh, I'm not falling for the dress thing again. And, fights his way through the island and everything like that. So we get all of that. And then we get after the 2-year time skip where we get the return to Sabaody arc where Ivankov, Sanji's passed the test and succeeded in everything, and Ivankov, sends Sanji, with the boat and with some of the other Okama to help him get back to Sabaody and, make his way there and everything. And Sanji is just not, he's so happy to be away from the island, but he's like, yeah, thank Eva for me for all the training and everything. Yeah, you can do that and everything. So we have all of that happens. There's not too much else there that we get with Ivankov during that arc. Later on during the Dressrosa saga, we have the Decks from the World where, Ivankov is looking over, Luffy's new bounty and the bounties of the Straw Hats and, reading about Luffy's reunion with his friends and everything. And again, we get similar thing during Whole Cake Island where, Ivankov, is reading about that, but also they're, getting ready for, visitors and everything like that for the other leaders of the Revolutionary Army to come to, Kamabaka Kingdom because of the fact that, Baltico was attacked and that location was found. So now they need to find a new place where they can have their base, and that becomes Kamabaka Kingdom. And of course, that means Dragon and Koala and the others are all making their way to Kamabaka Kingdom, including eventually the other commanders. Bello Betty, Morley, Karasu, and Lindbergh end up finding their way there. During the Reverie arc, we have it, of course, that is when, that's when Baltico was attacked and destroyed by the Blackbeard pirates, and the Revolutionary Army have to make their way to the Kamabaka Kingdom on Momoriori Island, I think is the name of the island. I just call it the Kamabaka Kingdom, Queendom, whatever. And they read about Luffy's exploits in Totland with the Germa and everything like that, and Ivankov's surprised that Sanji was actually like a prince of the Germa kingdom and everything like that. And, so it's, that's interesting. So we have all of that. And then, of course, during the Wano Country arc, we have it that where they end up reading about the report about Sabo, where it's like, where they think that it's like, according to the report, that Sabo is the one that assassinated Cobra. And Ivankov was just like, Sabo would not do that. And everybody else is like, Sabo would never do that. And they're just like, it has to be a mistake, or there has to be a reason for why. I mean, yes, there are certain reasons why Sabo would choose that decision, but they would be exceedingly very, 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 very drastic reasons where he would actually take up that point to assassinate Cobra. But we, of course, know that that is not what happens. And of course, when Sabo is able to finally get in contact with them, them through the Lelucia Kingdom, that he says, no, I did not kill Cobra, but I saw this thing. And then, of course, there's the whole island getting blown up of Lelucia Kingdom and everything. And of course, during everything just after the reverie, where they are dealing with the fact that, Morley and Lindbergh had brought back Kuma back to the island, the pacifista Kuma back to the island and everything. And that has been, unfortunately, in a very cyclical way, turned back into a slave. They're trying to get through to Kuma, and Kuma is just not responding to them. And what ends up happening is, of course, once Sabo returns to the island with the people from Lelucia, with the survivors from Lelucia and everything like that, including Moda, when he returns, him, Dragon, and Ivankov sit down, and they discuss what Sabo saw. They discuss that Sabo reveals that he saw that Cobra was assassinated by the Gorosei, that there is this being that is above them that sits on the empty throne, who is called Emu, who, and that the Gods Knights got involved with what happened with Milzigard and all this other stuff. And Sabo is just telling them what he saw and what he heard. I think he probably mentions that Cobra mentioned that the Nefeltari family is actually the Nefeltari D family. So it could be, that Sabo could have explained that to Dragon and Ivankov as well. And Ivankov, when they're, listening to this story, and ends up, actually bringing up the fact about the op fruit, because Ivankov pulls a book off of the shelf that seems to say Genesis on it, and is reading through it, and it mentions that, well, there was an emu that was a member of the Nerona family way back during the founding of the world government, and that there's the possibility that someone may have used the Opopnomi immortality operation to make him immortal, and that he might still be the same emu from way back then. But why he would have this type of power over the world government and over the Gorosei, where they would be like so willing to defer to him, we're not sure. So Ivankov is doing the theories like the rest of us do. Welcome to the family, Ivankov. And Sabo tells them about that speculates that there has to be an ancient weapon involved with what happened with Lelucia, and Sabo explains what he saw with the Mother Flame and everything like that. So that's about where we have it for what's going on with Ivankov currently, where Ivankov, Dragon, and Sabo were discussing what happened. And what ended up happening during that whole time frame was also Kuma escapes and blips himself and is making his way to the red line, and then climbs up the red line. But Ivankov tries to reason with him and tries to make him not do that. Same thing with Dragon. They also, in Lindbergh, are trying to reason with the Kuma before he disappears. So at this point in time, I would assume that Ivankov, Dragon, and Sabo are working on trying to figure out, well, what's our next step? What's our next move? Because the government have this giant sky laser that we don't know how often they can use it. And if they find our base, they're going to destroy our base. And with all of us on it. And that's not going to work well, because it's hard to figure out where this thing is, and we don't know how long it takes to power up. And we'll probably end up seeing their reactions to what's happening on Egghead when that information comes out. considering the fact that, Dragon and Vegapunk are, allies at that point, or, kind of allies and everything like that. So we'll see how all of that works into place. Ivankov even makes the comment that he doesn't think that Vegapunk would have, or that, which one is it? I think is it Ivankov that makes the comment that they don't think that Vegapunk would make the type of weapon that would be the Mother Flame. Doesn't mean Vegapunk may not, but that doesn't mean that York wouldn't develop it. Like what we saw, that York was the one that made the deal with the world government in the first place for that stuff, to become a celestial dragon. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. We also know that the Revolutionary Army have set up blockades against Marigewa to prevent food from getting up to Marigewa. By technicality, that also means I think that food is not necessarily getting to the Red Port. Which is not going to make the people that live at the Red Port very happy because they need food. But, so we'll see what the Revolutionary Army's next tactic is going to be to go up against the Celestial Dragons and cause problems there. And also pretty much certain that there's going to end up being stuff where at some point in time there will be a fight between the Revolutionary Armies and the Revolutionary Army and the God's Knights, combined with possibly the Gorosei, depending on stuff. And we have not seen Ivankov fight in a long time, and it will be very interesting to see if Ivankov has even gotten even stronger since then. And I don't know who Ivankov would end up fighting against. Would Ivankov fight against a member of the Royal Knight of God's Knights, or would they fight against one of the Gorosei? Don't know. We'll have to wait and find out. But that's what we have there for Ivankov at this point in time. The week after this goes up, we'll hopefully get the next chapter where we'll get some more information about what's going on in the flashback between Ivankov and Kuma and Ginny, and however she factors into everything. But that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.